I feel I have grown from those two a lot because the biggest thing they helped me learn was to accept to be myself and connect with people who like me the way I am. And that's what branding really is all about.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of season 1 of Meaningful Conversations with Stereotype Breakers. And I am so excited because today we are talking about personal branding. It's a big topic because everybody knows and kind of feels the pressure to create their own and to curate their own personal brand. But how do we go about it? How do we do it? There's so many unanswered questions. And today I have a special guest for you. Kelly has helped me create the Stereotype Breakers brand identity as it is and helped me with the rebranding. And I fell in love with her approach to branding, approach to brand identity, and, all the visual design that follows that whole process. So let me tell you more about Kelly to begin with, and then we'll jump into this conversation. Kelly started her business because of her love for coding and web development back in the MySpace and AOL days. While her clients came to her asking for a custom website, they also had no logo, no choice of colors or fonts, and they had no brand. They actually assumed that branding came with web design. This led Kelly to specialize in brand identity design and then branding strategy to better serve her audience while educating them on what branding actually truly means. In 2021, as the meaning of branding is once again lost in the internet noise, Kelly started branding with purpose, a design studio, a podcast, a course, and a branding movement, where the mission is to educate and empower women who want to build heartfelt brands that support their unique positioning in their market. Let's jump straight to our discussion with Kelly. Hi, Kelly. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing, Masha? It's so good to be here.
It's so nice to have you here. Thank you so much for coming, for finding time. Honestly, what you did with my brand has been incredibly helpful and incredibly organic. And I love your outlook on branding and especially personal branding as well. So I can't wait to get into the meat of this discussion.
Thank you so much. It's so much easier when I get to work with someone like you who knows what you want, and that's also why I kind of made a hybrid with coaching for those people who are not so clear on what they want, so I can help them see the bigger picture. So, yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into the discussion straight away. Let's start with what is a personal brand and who should be thinking about building one? What does a personal brand help us achieve, essentially?
Personal brand really is there is no easy way of saying this, but being yourself, right? But the trick with branding is you are yourself, but how do you want people to perceive that? That's a little trick when it is personal branding from just being a person. So on personal branding, you're going to be highlighting, and I'm not saying that you need to be a fake or a character, but you're going to be highlighting the things that you want people to notice the most about you. And that's how you're going to build your brand. As for what it helps you achieve, I think it can achieve whatever you want. Literally in 2021, just because I positioned myself as an expert in branding, because that's pretty much what branding does, right? It's building that image around you. Just because I embrace it, the educator, not necessarily an influencer, but like this whole new step in branding for me, that's when I got to be invited for podcasts like yours or for YouTube channels or even for a TV show in Florida. So it all really depends on what you want to get out of it. Literally, you can get because you are building an image for that message.
I love how you summarize it and how you distinguish between you and how you are being perceived as by other people. And it sounds like there's obviously a lot of intention that goes into that crafting that I don't want to say persona, but in a way it is a persona, which, is a little bit overwhelming to a lot of people because it's a big undertaking. How do you come up with this perfect image straight away? Where would you recommend for people who overwhelmed with the task to start so that they can remove those barriers and start making those steps into personal branding, and how do they keep going afterwards?
Yeah, because let's be honest, a brand is a lot of things, right? I always say that it's like this almost this mesmerizing puzzle. It's so many pieces of the puzzle, and there is no right or wrong in how you're gonna build a brand with all the pieces because there is the story brand, the messaging, the visuals, the photography that goes with the visuals and the logo and the color. It gets overwhelming. It's just so much. Plus the messaging and the mission and the vision. There is a lot of details. And I would say for anyone who wants to build a brand and feels overwhelmed, go back to the basic and focus on your why and on your audience needs. So, what is your why? Which is okay, it's gonna change. Everything in brand evolves with you. So, your why may eventually change. The same way that your audience needs might eventually change. So, it's always a combination of those two things, right? Because it's your why plus your audience need. And from there, you're gonna be refining the message that you're sending, of course, according to many other things like the product that you're selling, the idea that you're creating, the community that you're building. But your why and your audience is what always going to keep you focused, and everything else is going to come much easier once you're clear on your why and your audience needs.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, the why is always the driving factor behind any, or it should be the driving factor behind any project, let alone business or brand. So, okay, a lot of people are listening to this and they're probably saying, okay, personal branding sounds like something that I need to do, right? But I have a full time job and it is hectic. And, I also still want to have a life outside. What are your tips for people who have a hectic, a very busy job, but do want to build a consistent personal brand? What would your advice to those people be?
I think that when you have a busy life, and honestly, who doesn't these days, right? And you still want to build a brand. First of all, the thing is, if you don't build your brand, somebody's going to build it for you because it all comes back to how you want to be perceived. So if you are sending mixed messages, doesn't matter if it's your own business or if you're an employee, people are creating a profile for you unless you take charge of it and you put your feet down and say, no, this is how I want to be noticed. I want to be noticed and perceived as the expert or as the friendly, approachable person or as the teacher and the helper or as, so depending on how you want to be perceived, you're going to just pick one or two elements that are really true to your purpose and really reinforce how you want to be perceived. So if I am on a job, for example, let's say I'm an employee, because that's the thing with personal branding, right? It's for people in general. It's not necessarily for somebody who is running a business. So if I am on a job and I wanna get to a promotion that I'm overseeing people. So what are the traits in me that I can consistently highlight where people can perceive me as a leader, as responsible for a group? If that's what I'm aiming for. And if it's me and my business, then it goes back to your audience. How do I want to be perceived by my audience? I know I have to create my products, I have to do the marketing, I have this, I have that. So just grab that one important thing and create your content, your messaging, and everything around the one important thing. That's how you don't get lost in the thousands of things that branding really is. Like just choose the one main pillar, because we usually suggest that people have between 3 and 5 pillars. That's what the constant messaging that you're always going to be sending. Everything you're going to create is going to be around those pillars. If you feel you cannot have three of them, have one and just work on that. Because once that one thing is really solid, then you can start like slowly expanding.
As you're talking about this, I just remembered about how my dad was building his personal brand back in, I don't know, early 2000s, 1990s. He's in PR in Russia, and this was way before social media. And so it was before we perceived personal brand as only the content that we put out on social media platforms. We tend to forget sometimes that actually your personal brand is, this 360 thing that you're building, and it can be your personal brand within the organization, it can be your personal brand as a speaker. It doesn't even have to be social media related in the content that you're putting out, which is, yeah, like it's an I love this approach to personal branding because it's true, like you said, if you don't take control of it, somebody will create it for you.
Yep.
which honestly is a perfect leeway for my next question, which is all about founders and their public personas. In the recent years, we've had a lot of super successful companies display their one of their founders or their only founder as a public persona. Should all founders consider to have a very public personal brand, and what are the pros and cons of doing that?
Yeah, the thing with large companies, or sometimes not so large, let me give this one by example because I think the example is going to work better here. Let's say we want to work with Marie Folio, and her company is her name. The whole face of the company is her. You don't hear about nobody else really. But the chances that when you sign up to work with Marie Folio, you're actually going to be working with her all the time are minimal. And that happened to me a couple of times when I was signing up for mentorship. Because even though I have been doing this for 2 decades, I'm not a jack of all trades and I don't try to be. So if I need help with the sales, if I need help with more direct marketing or whatever it is, I'm going to go and get a mentor. And that has happened to me, and that has bummed me out so badly that it's like you think you're going to work with this one coach and you work with another 10 coaches who work under this one coach, but it's just because the brand is a personal brand and it's all around that person and you get their vibes. You are on their Instagram live and you're thinking, oh yes, I'm going to work with them. So you do get disappointed. I would say that's a little bit of a con, right? And everybody should be prepared for that. And I think that the trick over there is always constantly putting that on your marketing and on your brand that you are a team. I mean, it's you and it's your company and it's your face, but it's actually a team. There is a brand design company. They are a studio and they do that really, really well. The name is Brand Well. And Victoria is the lead designer and it's her company, but she has another three designers. Now, although she is on 80% of things, the other 20% is always about her girls, or it's her with her girls. So everybody knows at every moment who is the project manager and who is the web designer and who is this and who is that. And they are prepared when they go into Brandwell. They know they're going to be working with several other professionals, not just Victoria. And I think that's really important to prepare your audience like that. Now, going back to your the first part of your question, which is like how important should it be, especially on a large company. I think it's actually very important to brand any company these days around that one main figure. And that's just because as humans, we are attracted, especially on this generation, we are attracted to the values and the people behind the business, right? It's not just about the branding, the product and how the product stands out. There's a lot of good products today. There's a lot of big companies on the internet. What makes you stand out, it's probably going to be your uniqueness, your unique story, your unique persona, your unique humanity, and we are looking for that connection. So it's just a tricky thing, branding around the person, but always making sure that you always telling your audience that it's actually a team. That's usually the case in large companies anyway. It's doable. You just have to pay a lot of attention so you don't disappoint your audience.
I love all of the different things that you talked about and the approach to different types of organizations, right? Personal branded companies versus startups that are providing a service, but having that person in the center is super super essential. And I've honestly have noticed that when I was trying to get much more behind the scenes, unfortunately people didn't connect as much with my brand, which is sad, but it's just a reality, something that we need to understand. Let's talk about curation versus behind the scenes, though. I feel like this is a very nice evolution of our conversations. How does one balance out these two things? How does one balance out showing, the real, the raw, the vulnerable versus the curated, everything's perfect with some Canva posts, essentially?
I think that really depends on what are your goals out of your brand. I like a lot of hitting on the point that there is no right or wrong. There is only what resonates between you and your audience. Because on a personal brand, you are the bridge between the things that you're selling, which is pretty much your business, and your audience. And for example, you tried to go behind the scenes and that didn't resonate well with your audience, that may be because they were like trained to expect to have more contact with you already, or that may be because of the message that you were sending from the beginning when you were like more on an influencer type and stage of your business, and people were like just so used to seeing you. So it all really depends on how you're building everything, and sometimes transition is a big impact on the audience, especially between the business and the audience. So it really goes back to the personal brand to decide how we want to do that. Now, when it comes to a curated feed, me as a visual artist, I can do photography and design. I think it's so important. I personally don't like going to a feed and seeing a visual mess. I don't like seeing pictures that look like my, I don't know, 57 pre social media uncle took that picture. I mean, I don't like it, but what I'm gonna say is, if you want to do it, then I am not your audience, and that's okay, because not everybody in the world is going to be your audience. So that's where it goes back to your why and your audience needs. You just really need to know your audience. So once you know them and once you know what you want, you accept that it's okay. You're not for everybody. How do you want to work this out? Now, if you do want to have a balance, which is completely fine, because I do believe that the beautiful thing about social media today is that it allows you to educate and grow together on this journey with your audience, and they really want it. You see all the times that the accounts growing the most are the ones who do this genuine connection on the candid photography, original beautiful shots. That doesn't mean it has to be bad quality, it just means it needs to be as natural as you can be. Mix it with some teaching, with some Canva graphics. Why not? People like it. Some of my most popular reels, of course, actually are made with graphics. They are not made with my face. Sometimes I'm going to be narrating and saying some things in the background, but sometimes they are just regular graphics. But I'm teaching valuable stuff in a very easy way, and people love it. So just find a balance of whatever works for you. If you want a lot of pictures, beautiful. If you want a lot of Canva graphics, beautiful, as long as it aligns with your audience needs and whatever you are selling. Otherwise, you're just sending the wrong message. Like, you don't want to have me on a 100% too candid and too natural feed, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna buy this because it's not for me. So as long as you understand that, you're gold.
Love that advice. And it's so true. It really comes down to who you're talking to, who is perceiving your feed, and who will benefit from the content that you're putting out. Let's I don't want to say switch gears, but kind of discuss the subject from a slightly different perspective, from the perspective of you versus your personal brand. What would you recommend in terms of creating a boundary between you and your brand, figuring out how much you're going to share, what are the what is the divide between your online persona and your real persona, your real self?
I think that really goes with what you're comfortable with, especially when it comes to a personal brand. I have seen people who build personal brands where they curse all the time because that's the person that they are, and they want to be that transparent with the audience, and that's fine. And I have seen people who have a huge I'm gonna give myself as an example here. For example, I love horror. I love horror and black things and like dark and creepy, and nobody would ever say, because I also have this other side who is more feminine and who is more girly and loves going to the beach. And that's the side that I use on personal brand. Now, does that mean I'm tricking people? Not really. But if I try to put everything in one mix, I'm going to be sending mixed messages. Am I trying to understand a punk rock group, or am I trying to like understand and attract like this female entrepreneur group? And I just have to understand which one of those sides of my personality and my likes my audience is more attracted to. And then I just go and I curate all those things. Like I said, I'm not tricking anyone. Anytime, the topic comes up about, like, I'm the first one to jump and say, oh, I'm a huge horror fan. It's not all over my feed on social media because it doesn't serve a purpose for my business. So you just need to find what serves a purpose and what doesn't, you put on the side. And whenever the opportunity comes, if you are comfortable mentioning it, fine. If not, then that's completely okay.
That's such great advice, because figuring out what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, because we connect with people who are human, and that a lot of the times means sharing some of your vulnerabilities and understanding that you got to be comfortable with sharing that stuff, and drawing the line with what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, and being intentional about that line is very important. One of the influencers that I was watching do that was Jenna Kutcher, who shared a lot of stuff about her infertility, her fertility issues, and miscarriages, but which is a super vulnerable, subject to discuss, super personal. But then at the same time, she doesn't share some of the other stuff. And because you know this part of her life, you think that you're really connected to her. However, she chooses to share this. She chooses to share this because, first of all, she thinks it's an important conversation to discuss. A lot of women relate to that. A lot of women experience that. And it's kind of, I don't know why it's been a taboo subject for so long. Well, knowing that you're not alone is very important. But also, this is a topic that she clearly has worked her comfort zone up. I don't know how to explain that, but basically,
Yeah.
there are other topics that she doesn't want to talk about, I'm sure. But we feel like we know her, we connect with her on a deeper level because we know something vulnerable about her. I needed more air there. Okay, you mentioned this at the beginning, and I want to go further into this topic, the topic of growing and evolving with your brand. So we all grow, we all change, our audiences change. How do we get our brand to evolve with us?
I think that in the case of a business brand, when it evolves with you, it's going to evolve according to your business model.
Mhm.
A lot of people, let's say that you start selling small PDF workbooks, and then 5 years later you are selling courses, and 10 years later you became a coach. There has been a huge journey in there, a big change, because your services change it. So the way you present yourself is going to change, or the way you position your business in the market is going to change. In the case of a personal brand, because it's so personal, it can actually just keep changing around you as long as you build the brand in that way. That's when you see a lot of people pivoting without a problem, and the audience kind of goes with them because they are attracted to the personality, to the values, to more core and deeper values, not necessarily the services. If you are, and everybody's going to go through that because people change all the time, the same way the brands change. So if you start your business when you were 21 and now you are 32, you are a different person. You like different colors. You probably dress up differently. If you are a woman, there is, or even a man, there is a chance that you're now a parent, and your schedule change it, and the way you saw things change it. I am 100% sure that there are many things that I was like in favor or against 15 years ago or 10 years ago, that my view has changed today. And it's okay as a human to change and evolve, which means it's also okay for your brand keep going with you. I do not think it needs to be overwhelming as long as you take one step at a time. It's always very important to prepare your audience. Hey, this change is coming. Just have open, honest conversations with your audience, in a sense that it's like, I have been thinking, I think I'm gonna take my business or my brand in a different direction. I think I'm mature. I am attracted to different colors today. I'm ready to send a different message. I'm ready to up level the services, and your audience is gonna listen to it and they're gonna appreciate it, because one of the things that humans love is the storytelling, and you're just telling your story right there, and you're allowing them into your journey with you, and they love growing with you. So there is no worries. Just do your thing. As long as you're having open conversations and preparing your audience for the change, for this change that is coming, they're actually gonna love it. It's actually a good marketing tip.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that it's more of a two-way conversation. It's like you're taking them on this evolution journey as opposed to just pushing the new persona on them and being
Yeah.
like, "Well, sorry, this is where we're going." But this is more of a, you know, we're doing this. You're part of this. Let's do this together. I want to talk about your experience in personal branding. You've been building your brand and you've been evolving your brand for so many years at this point. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you've made along your journey in personal branding, and what did you learn from them?
I have made several mistakes, of course, everybody does. But and that's how you learn. What you really want to do is like the messy action that brings you to the perfect solution, always evolving. But I am very conscious of two huge branding mistakes that I've done. One was in the very beginning of my career per se, and the other one was actually the beginning of this year. The last year was all about the time that I actually met you, which was when I was rebranding. So let me do the first one. The first one was over 10 years ago. It was a long time ago, 15 years ago maybe, where I decided to put a very catchy name. I am horrible in naming, and I decided to go with a really, really catchy name for my brand studio. And the name was Pink and Lola, which sounds has a nice sound to it. So it's Pink and Lola Design Studios, and that's fantastic. But then it started annoying me because people were sending me emails requesting work, and they were Dear Pink or Dear Lola because they assumed there was two people working there, and obviously the names were Pink and Lola. And at some point, that's not right. And like I said, it was 15 years ago, and I was just getting the hang of the whole branding thing. And the last one actually was between the end of the last year and the beginning of this year, when I would say I was pivoting. I was exploring this new educator path, and I got a sales coach, and she had this very, this multiple seven figures and the high ticket, all these mentalities, like it's all over and all around. That was actually the reason why I dropped it off her program halfway. I'm like, nope, that's not what I want. But when I was doing that, I felt like I was pressured into being a higher self, presenting my best appearance, which is, I'm not saying you should not do that, that's not it, but it needs to feel right. So I started rebranding, and in a sense that my messaging, my copy, my logo, everything was like this fancy colors, more on the gold type of vibe, and very elegant. It was very beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't me. I'm like, okay, that could be somewhat the audience that I'm aiming for, and not even that's the budget of the audience that I'm aiming for. But that was, I just didn't like that. So now I'm here because my coach is telling me to assume that because I want to be a coach and I want to charge high ticket, that I also need to build a brand that looks fancy, because then I feel like I was tricking my audience. Hey, look at this fancy visuals. Give me a lot of money because I look fancy. That's not how it goes. So that felt very, very fake, very, very wrong. And as a branding professional, the whole thing was just like, you know what, this program is not for me. Let me just go back to the sketchboard and let me build a brand that is gonna be a rebrand. It's gonna have a new message. It is gonna be a new audience, new services, but aligns with my purpose. And my purpose is not tricking you to think that I'm fancy. I'm very chill and very laid back. So those were my biggest mistakes. And I feel I have grown from those two a lot, because the biggest thing they helped me learn was to accept to be myself and connect with people who like me the way I am. And that's what branding really is all about.
Absolutely. I have goosebumps right now. Thank you so much for sharing those because I feel like asking people about their biggest achievements, great. They're awesome. Achievements are always wonderful, but I feel like people connect much more and learn much more from each other's mistakes because
Yep.
we all make them.
Yep.
And if we're not making them, we're not trying new things. To kind of summarize the whole conversation, now that we've discussed so many different aspects of personal branding, what are some of your biggest personal branding tips that you would like to give the audience that is looking to build a personal brand or continue building their personal brand?
I think that my biggest tip is going to be on the visuals. And I feel that that's just because people in general are very, very attached to visuals. We are on the age of Instagram and YouTube, and visuals are very important. Now, I want everybody to understand that I work to make you understand that visuals are less important than you think, right? It's more about your audience, your message, etc. But because visuals still play a very big part, my biggest tip would be yes, it has to be you. It has to feel right. But it needs to align with what you're selling. It needs to align with your purposes. So when you're building your visual brand, just keep in mind, buying a painting for your living room. That's 100% personal, and that's going to be there. Your brand is because you are selling something. So always keep in mind how everything is going to align, from the design of your logo to the colors you are choosing to the way that you are dressing to the video that you're creating. Everything is sending one same message, and all those things are visual. The space where you work, your desk, the decoration, the clothes that you present yourself on an event, all that are visual ways of communicating your brand. All that's going to have to align with the way you talk. All that's going to have to align with the message you're sending, of course, with the price point of the products that you're charging. Everything is telling this one story. So I think that in the end, my biggest tip is, what is the story that you are telling? Now just pay attention to everything else and see how that's going to align to your story.
Such a 360 approach, and I love it. Honestly, that's something that I need to get better at. Make sure that my wardrobe is also aligned with some of the branding and all that stuff. Which is, hey, maybe that's a brand, that's a company expense, business expense at that
It
point.
is. It actually is. It's tax
So
deductible.
hell yeah. Tips for all of you brand builders who do have a company and can deduct those things. Kelly, thank you so much for this
You're
conversation.
very
You have shared
welcome.
so much goodness, so many insights. Thank you so much. How can people find you and learn more about your work?
First of all, let me say it was my pleasure being here. I love you. I love the Stereotype Breakers. So I'm so humbled to be here and support your project. And another thing that I want to say, how people contact me, Instagram is usually the best way. And that's just because, like here today, the best way that I can help is by answering questions. So I always encourage people, like, ask me your branding questions, because that's how I can be my best self in helping you. My Instagram is at Hey Kelly Brito, or you can go to hashtag branding with purpose studio. So I decided, even though I did rebrand, I didn't want to change my username, because it's still a personal brand. And that's the beauty of it. I just work with a hashtag and my username in one go. And my website is brandingwithpurpose.studio.
Thank you so much, Kelly. This conversation was just, it gave me goosebumps on multiple occasions. I love you. I love your work. I love your approach to branding. Thank you so much for sharing it all.
Sure, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much. It was so good to be here. Can't wait to talk to you again.
Kelly, thank you so much. This conversation was awesome, and I'm sure it answered so many open ended questions that a lot of people had. Actually, a lot of the questions that I asked you were sourced from our Instagram page, from one of those question stickers. So, yeah, a lot of those questions were the real questions that a lot of people are asking, and you answered them brilliantly. Honestly, so much food for thought. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you thought about it in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. And also, if you can give us feedback on social media on the podcast, or if there are comments enabled on your platform, hey, we're listening. But you can always also directly respond to our emails if you're on our email list, and you will be in our inboxes. We're always listening. We're always hungry and thirsty for feedback, because feedback feeds our souls. Subscribe or follow this podcast on the podcasting platform of your choice. And also, of course, subscribe to us on YouTube. That's the right verb here. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, where we release the video versions of the podcast, in case if you want to see our facial expressions as we talk, and me nodding behind the scenes sometimes, because I nod a lot. Share, like, comment, anything helps with the algorithm. And of course, if you are on a podcasting platform, please give us a review, because it really helps spread the word about this. And it basically supports this podcast, this channel, and enables me to interview more interesting guests and answer a lot of interesting questions. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful time today you're currently experiencing. Bye.